name is Peter Vallarino, and I was born in Oakland on February 24th, 1935.
All right. So tell me how your family came to be in Walnut Creek.
My father and my mother, of course, lived in Oakland when I was born.
What were their names?
And his name was Antonio, and her name was Enrica Ferrari, was her maiden name. And he had a ravioli factory and deli, and he was in partnership with my mother's brother. And he had to deliver ravioli in his panel truck, so he would drive from Oakland and parts east, northeast, and whatever, and when he came back, he would come through Walnut Creek. And he fell in love with Walnut Creek. He said, gee, you know, it'd be nice to get a nice place for, let's say, weekends, summer, vacation, things like that, in Walnut Creek, and that's what he did. He ended up doing that, and he bought a place on, which was called Walden Road, because there was no freeway then. And then, of course, when the freeway came in, they named this part San Luis. But we loved it. We came up here on the weekends, and not so much weekends, because my father worked most of the weekends, but we came up like on his days off that were like half a day on Tuesday, Wednesday, and then during the summer we'd come up quite often. And just a wonderful place. It was just, most of the zoning in Walnut Creek then was agricultural. There was a lot of stores, like down on Locust Street we had the Farmers Feed and Supply, and Escott Jones was the owner and proprietor there, and provided the feed for the different animals that people had on their farms here. And that was very interesting. And then they had another place called Poultry Producers, and then they had the trains. They didn't have BART or anything like that. And then, of course, during the war, because of the gasoline shortage, they didn't have a lot of trucks. They had a lot of trains that did a lot of train. There was a lot of train tracks in Walnut Creek going through, which is now California Boulevard. That was a train that belonged to the railroad, and but it was a nice community. It was a wonderful community. People were very friendly and fairly well educated, and they were very sociable. And there was a lot of socializing coming in, a lot of parties, not a lot of parties, shouldn't call them parties, but just family things, you know, were very nice. In the summertime, we had a house that was built in '41, and it was built just as the war was breaking out. The first house that we had was built in 1938. It's still there now, next to the one that was built in '41. And it was a nice little place, knotty pine and all that sort of thing. But the one that was built in '41, the construction began, and then the war broke out. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and all the materials were very hard to get, because supplies were limited, everything was frozen, you know, the war was on and the whole bit. So what happened was, it was still built. My dad said, go ahead and build it strong. He did. There's, I think about every foot there's a huge 2x12. You know, there's a 3-car garage underneath and a couple of rooms down there and whatever. So, and he told me, he says, Mr. Vallarino, you'll never get your money out of this house, but it'll be a well-built home, and it is a very well-built home. But the total price was $7,000, and it was on 1.5 acres, 1 3/4 acres. And the other house my dad also had was there, and it's still there now. There's about 3 acres altogether.
What's the address?
The oldest one, 1938, built in '38, was it's 1728, San Luis. And the other one, where my brother lives now, that was our family home. And that's 1740 San Luis Road. That's the mailing address I use. But I live here at 627 Enrica Lane, and I subdivided this property on this side, on Enrica Lane. I bought an old home here and had room to, it was on 1 acre altogether. So, and I named it after my mother, Enrica, and
And then
that's where I live.
What year did you all move to Walnut Creek full time?
Full time was 41.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so you've lived in this neighborhood where we are right now your whole life?
Just about. Yeah. But of course, the first few years of my life were in Oakland, the Italian community in the Temescal area. Wonderful people, wonderful people. And I worked at my, when I was a teenager, I would go down from Acalanes High School and go down to Oakland, to my father's deli and work on the weekends and whatever.
What was the name of the deli?
Geneva. 1926 is when he started that business with my uncle. And there's another Geneva too. And then there's a lot of history with the Geneva delicatessens. But he had a ravioli factory and a deli. So he had wholesale and retail. It was a lot of work. He lived to be 66, and that was it. He was a hard worker, honest man. Remember one day a lady left $1 on the counter. She got her change. She was in a hurry, and there's $1, and my dad picked it up. He ran half a block down Telegraph Avenue after her. I said, Dad, she'll be back. Good customer.
Did your dad have a business in Walnut Creek?
No, they all asked him, so why don't you get a business in Walnut Creek? You know, or you can make another branch of your business. He said, no. He says, the Italians don't do it that way. They want their own personality there in that particular place. That was his response to it. But he had people that would buy his ravioli that had places in Walnut Creek. Marty's Gourmet House on Locust, the Vittle Vendor on Main Street, Desani's Delicatessen in Lafayette. There were just some of the people that they liked his ravioli. He made the greatest ravioli. And so he would deliver wholesale, to these people and whatever. So, but he never did open a place in Walnut Creek. It would have been more convenient. There were some days where we'd have a flood, where you have a terrific rain, and to get to Oakland from here was a real chore because there was a lot of flooding, and it took him one day till 10 in the morning. He left at 6:30 or 7. And but anyway.
How would you say, you were talking earlier a little bit about the community feeling in Walnut Creek. So how was it different then when you were growing up from how it is now?
Well, let's see. Many more people now, so you don't know anybody. I mean, for years we would get together. I'd go down on a Saturday, as an example. This I can do it. You don't meet anybody you know. But in those days, let's say 1945 or 1950 or whatever around there, I'd go downtown. My mom would send me down. I would go down to Herb's Hardware. There weren't any those big item stores at all, So go down to Herb's Hardware and get some turpentine or whatever she wanted me to get. So I'd go down there, leave here about maybe 9:30 in the morning. 11 o'clock, I'm not back yet. What's going on? Well, I run into people that I know. I mean, there's all kinds of people in Walnut Creek there. I mean, it's one big family, and you don't see them during the week a lot of times, because everyone's working and stuff. But you knew everybody. So you had to say hello, or get a soda or whatever, And but that's what the big difference is now, is you don't know anybody. It's just like, you can go shopping. There's a lot of places to go shopping, and people are friendly and all that, but it's not like it used to be. You don't get that family feeling.
What are some other examples or stories that you can tell me about what life was like back then?
Well, if something went on that was unusual, like let's say some kids didn't come home from school on time. Uh-oh. Now, that was an alert. And for some reason, although we didn't have a lot of communications, but we did have, when something like that happened, people would know. And so my brother one afternoon, him and 2 or 3 other fellows, it was near the end of the semester at school, you know, summer vacation starting, and they decided to go to Lafayette, take a walk to Lafayette on the railroad tracks or something. I don't know what it was. And the whole city was looking for them within about an hour, you know. So that was a difference. So now it would never happen. You never hear about it. You might hear about it on the 11 o'clock news at night or something, but in those days it was different. Something else I wanted to mention about that, but I couldn't mention. Couldn't think of it right away.
Would you like me to close this door between here and the refrigerator? Can you do that?
Okay, that's good. Tell me about A.G. Ferrari.
A.G. Ferrari was my uncle, and he came to the United States, as my mother did, and my father. They were immigrants, all Italian immigrants. They were born in Italy. And A.G. Ferrari was my father's business partner for many years. And then when my father, let's go back. A.G. Ferrari's son, Harold, my godfather, went into his own business. It was called Ultra Luca Delicatessen, I believe. It was in Oakland. So they branched off. They went on their own way, and my father still had his place too. Well, A.G. Ferrari, he started with his son, Harold. His family started the A.G. Ferrari food stores, and they expanded. And at one time, I think they got up to, I don't know, maybe 12 or 13. They went to the West Bay, you know, down there, San Carlos, and then one was in Corte Madera and Oakland and Piedmont, and now I think there's only one or two left, I think, because there wasn't that much business, and the imports went way up, euro and the whole bit. I don't know all the details, so I'm not going to comment on that because I really don't know all the ins and outs, but. The food was terrific because I remember at my mother's funeral, they catered it, and oh gosh, it was, everyone just, you know, talked about it for weeks. They had all this really good Italian. A lot of it was imported, of course, and especially the spumante, which is Italian type champagne. You know, it's very good. Anyway, but according to my dad, did not have any place in Walnut Creek, but I worked for my father at his place when I was 14. I started, and I worked for a couple of years there, and around 16 I was at Akalani's going to school, and a gentleman that we knew, family knew, opened didn't open, he bought a deli in Walnut Creek on Main Street, about maybe 5 doors down from the Bank of America on the east side of Main Street. And what happened was he got in too deep. He had another business going in Oakland. It was a janitorial service. It was very good business. But he tried to do that with some other fellow that talked him into it. Oh, we'll make a lot of money. We'll get a deli, and Walnut Creek was one for sale and all that. And it didn't work out. So his buddy bailed out. And so he knew about me and my family. So he asked me, he said, look, he says, you got a lot of experience in there. Can you work after school? I said, yeah. I said, but I'll bring my homework with me. He says, fine. So I'd get in my 39 Chevy from Akalani's, drive into Walnut Creek, and I was working at the store, $1.50 an hour, which was good money for me in those days. It was nice. And so I worked every day, and then I worked on Saturday, and I might have even worked on Sunday. I can't remember, but the one thing that happened is, I know one time I had, these young fellas came in and I had wine. And I'm 16 years old and I'm the only one in the store, you know. And, we have wine on the shelf and all that. And I said no. But then I thought, I'm probably breaking the law too because I'm not supposed to be here selling anything like that. But I would sell to adults. But no one said anything because It didn't have any consequence of anything. You know, I didn't get involved in all that stuff. Sold it just like I was a worker there, and that was it. And that's what I was.
What was the name of the store?
Originally, I know the store, it was called the Food Spot Deli. Food Spot Deli was what it was called. Then I think the fellow moved, the guy that sold it, I think he sold it to someone else, and there was another name involved there. All I remember, he had a huge German Shepherd that he would keep there in the store with him for protection, I guess, or something. But that was before I worked there. It was 1949, I think, when I worked there.
Was it downtown when you worked there? Where was it located?
It was about 4 or 5 doors down from the Bank of America on the east side of Main Street. It was right on Main Street. That was the main street. Was the main street? It was Main Street. You know.
So, what were your interactions with some of the people in the community or the business people down there?
It was fun. It was fun. It was fun. Yeah. You know, you knew all the different merchants. And now this is another thing. If any merchant took advantage of someone or did something that wasn't up to the, you know, standards that people are used to, they wouldn't get much business because the word traveled fast in a small town. You know, oh, such and such, you know, be careful with him. Oh, what do you mean? You know, and look out, because you had to be real family people then, you know, and you don't, and you know, if I can mention, good Christians, you know, you don't want to take advantage of anyone, shortchange anybody, sell inferior goods. You know, it's like the other day I sent in for something and it was $14, and they charged me $15.98 for shipping. So, you know,
Yeah.
they didn't try things like that.
Yeah, no. So, you've been pretty deeply involved with sports and people that were popular in the sporting or talented in the sporting
Yeah.
in Walnut Creek. So, can you tell me
Yes.
some of those people?
Yeah, I will. One thing my father always emphasized is, and I found out later why, he always made sure that we had a baseball field, which he owned, across the street. It was 1 acre and 2 acres, something like that. And he also had a basketball court built right on the property, on the big driveway, the big turnaround. And so all the people he could see where we were. And because all our friends would be invited over all the time. We had a hell of a good time, you know, and kept us out of trouble. And it was really great. And of course, sports were big then. And there were some summers where we would go out and at 9 o'clock in the morning after breakfast and play. After we watered the animals and took care of everything, we would go out and play baseball. And we would play and play. And then one of the mothers had a whistle. Otherwise, you couldn't hear her. But when lunch was ready, she would blow the whistle. You know, one of these police-type whistles. And then the kids would go to lunch. And then we'd go out in the afternoon, play again. And even at night, if it was daylight saving like it is during summer, then we would play. And then sometimes the adults would get in there. The parents would get in, and they'd go out there with their baseball bats and gloves and all that, you know. The only bad thing, it was near the road, and if you hit the ball far enough, which a lot of people did, if it was timed right, it wouldn't hit the car. But I remember one time the ball went way up in the sky, and it was somebody hit it really high, and here comes the car. Oh, and the car won't. They're not going to get hit, and the car kept coming, and the ball kept coming, and boom, and it just barely missed the driver. It hit just above the driver's side window. But outside of that, it kept us out of trouble, and we never got hurt playing. Although one time, I did some bad things. I was swinging the bat around, and I broke a window. And then another time, I threw a ball, and my brother went over to catch it. It was close to the house. We shouldn't be playing close to the house. And it bounced over his head and broke the plate glass window, the big one, you know. So one day I called my dad. Well, I had to call my dad, you know, and that was bad, tell him what happened. So about a week later, I wanted to have permission to go somewhere. And what he did is he answered the phone at work, and he said, he heard my voice, says, "Oh, no. Oh, what did you do now? Did you break another window?" I said, "No, Dad, I just want permission to go to someplace, whatever it was, you know." But
Where was the ball field located at?
it was on Valor Court. But they named it that court after my dad, Vallarino. But he didn't like to have his name there because the homes that they promised they would build did not meet up with the expectations that he was told they would. It wasn't. But anyway, that's where we had our field, and we built our own backstop. The kids did everything in those days. They did, they were handy. You could build things and all that, and built a backstop, put in the bases. It wasn't big. The field isn't that big of a deal. The only thing is you can't build lawn. You can't put in a lawn or something like that. The grass like they have in the major leagues, you can't do that. But we played on that field. It was tough too. We were good players.
What position did you play?
Pitcher. Yeah, on 1949 we were the only undefeated team in the history of Walnut Creek. This is at the grammar school, which was 8th grade then. There was 8th grade, so there was no middle school. But the 8th grade had their athletes and their sports, and we were the only undefeated team, and we still meet now. Here it is, 70 or 65 years later, and we still the same gang. It's not for that reason, but it's the same kids that played there, and we had some great athletes there. And we had I remember the one that sticks to my mind was he was a bit older than me, Norm Van Brocklin, and he was born in South Dakota, but his family moved to Walnut Creek. They lived on Parkside. And to me, he's the most famous person that lived in Walnut Creek.
Why?
Because he was nationally known. He won the same award that Joe Montana won. So he was in that level.
Who did he play for?
He played professionally for the Rams and for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Do you know what position?
Quarterback. Yeah, quarterback. He went to Acalanes High School, and I remember he was just a real tough guy, but hard to get along with for some people. You had to understand him, but he was, I didn't know him that well, but he always kept in touch with Walnut Creek because that was his home, and he went into the Navy for a while after school, and then he was drafted by the Rams, and he played for the Rams, and they had two quarterbacks. They had him and a fellow named, oh geez, I know that name easy, but since my chemo, it's been a little rough. Waterfield, Bob Waterfield. And so they didn't call it a quarterback controversy, because you can only have one quarterback on the field, So they have two. Well, a lot of people have two. A lot of teams have two or three, but they're second string, third string. So they're in their own place. But there was controversy as to who was the best quarterback. Well, what happened was, eventually Norm Van Brocklin was traded, but he kind of enjoyed the company of this other quarterback because his other quarterback was married to Jane Russell, the famous movie actress. And so when he went out to dinner one night with them, him and his wife, and then Bob Waterfield and Jane Russell, they went out. Everyone in Walnut Creek found out about it because he'd call, he'd talk to a couple of his friends, and it was kind of interesting. He always kept in touch with his friends in Walnut Creek, let them know what was going on. And then what happened was they were rebuilding the Philadelphia Eagles, and they had to get a coach, which they got Buck Shaw, who incidentally was the first 49er coach that the 49ers had. And so they got him, and he said, well, I need a good quarterback. If you want me to coach your team to a championship, we have a chance, we'll do it, but we need a good quarterback. So that's when they got Van Brocklin from the Rams. He went to Philadelphia. The problem was that we're in Walnut Creek, and we're in the Western Division. We got the Niners here and everything, and the Niners weren't in the Eastern Division, so he very seldom played in this area. But I have a nice program, just like new, and he played in 1960 at Kezar Stadium, and what a player. I mean, his passes were just beautiful. They were just beautiful spiral passes, everything. So that year, 1960, they win, the Eagles win the Eastern Division of the NFL. And the Western Division was won by the Green Bay Packers and Vince Lombardi. Now, Vince Lombardi, if you remember, every year when they win whoever wins the Super Bowl, the best team in the world championship, they win the Lombardi Trophy. Lombardi was the greatest, coach of all time. So here we are with Norm Van Brocklin and Philadelphia Eagles, and they're playing Green Bay with Vince Lombardi. And Vince Lombardi had never lost a postseason game, championship game, never any postseason game. So we all went over to we had black and white TV, went over to Shady Glen. I had a friend that lived in Shady Glen over here in Walnut Creek, and she was just a wonderful gal. She's still around now. And so we all sat down and watched this, and we thought, none of us said it, but we knew there's no way Norm Van Brocklin and the Eagles would beat Green Bay Packers and Vince Lombardi, but we were going to watch the game anyway. So what happens? Van Brocklin wins. So Van Brocklin from Walnut Creek, the only football player, quarterback, to quarterback his team to a victory over Vince Lombardi in a postseason game. And it was really amazing what he did. And then that was the last game he played. He retired. And he became the first coach of the Minnesota Vikings. And he had some health problems, and he had a brain tumor. And they required surgery. And he did not get along with the press at all. He didn't like sports writers. And so anyway, he had some friends, I think, there. But after the surgery, there was a press conference. And here he is up in front of everybody. And he said, there was only sports writers that were men then. Now we have some women that are doing the same thing. But he said, "Gentlemen, I had a brain transplant. And the brain I received," well, he says, "I was lucky, because the brain I received belonged to a sports writer, and therefore it had never been used." So that I remembered. I don't know if it was the exact words that he used, but anyway. And he visited Acalanes High School. And I talked to the principal, who was a friend of mine. He lived on Parkside also at one time. He was a neighbor of Norm Van Brocklin, just about a half a mile from where I live now, And he told me that when Norm went over there, he told the principal that his greatest days of his life were at Acalanes, playing quarterback and being with the gang. And it was just wonderful. It was a wonderful area. And living in Walnut Creek. Walnut Creek was the place. You had a wonderful time. So just a good story about, Norm Van Brocklin. And he passed away, unfortunately. He was only 57 when he died. But I remember he always kept in touch. And then he also knew Billy Martin. And one time he came out and visited, and him and his niece, my brother knows her, I know her too, but I'm not going to mention names or anything, but him and his niece went over and to visit Billy Martin, because he had become friends with Billy Martin.
He was the coach?
The famous, Billy Ball, New York Yankees, American League, coach the A's and all that. And so he wanted to visit him, and he lived in Danville. So Norm Van Brocklin came out from Georgia. He had a nice peach farm in Georgia, and he came out and went over to Danville, where Billy was living. He rang the bell, and it was about 10 or 11 in the morning, something like that, and Billy's maid answered the door, and she said, "I cannot let you talk to Mr. Martin because I have specific orders not to bother him when he's sleeping." And that was it. So he didn't get a chance to see him. I know that. I don't know if I should have said that or not, but it was a story. It was just something that came on.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Who are some of the other sports figures or stories that you know about Walnut Creek or that you recall?
Oh, there were a lot of athletes there that came through Walnut Creek that played. But I can't think of all of them. And if I start talking about one, I'll forget someone else, and it'll give. That's bad, you know. But there was one other NFL player, and his name was Roger Harding, and he had gone to Acalanes also, and then he had played for a couple, 3 teams in the NFL. Didn't play for a long time. The only thing I know about him, I talked to some of the old timers that are older than me. They're in their 90s, and one lady told me that as far as she knew, he was a good player and came from a wealthy family. So that's all I could tell you about him. But I didn't research all these things. These are just things that I knew by being in Walnut Creek, you know, just living here.
Tell me what part sports played in the community.
Oh, gosh, you don't want me to talk that long, do you? Right after the war, the war is always World War II when I mention the war, we didn't have much going on here, and the young men that had come back from the service, they needed something. They couldn't go back to high school. Some couldn't go to college or whatever, but we needed something some action, some athletics. So we had a mayor, and his name was, they called him Charrington. Horace Charrington, wonderful man. And he said, you know, I'm going to go ahead and donate and I'm going to pay for fixing that field in Walnut Creek. See, we had a park, but there was nothing there. And he put in money so they could build this park, this baseball field. It was for softball, fast pitch. Fast pitch is very exciting, and it's harder to hit a fast pitch softball than it is a baseball. And it's an interesting game. So we had that. And there were 4 teams. There were the VFW. There's a war story right there, right? Veterans of Foreign Wars. American Legion. There was a team, Tiny's Hut. That was a famous watering hole, Tiny's Hut. And Lafayette Merchants were composed of mostly people from Acalanes, athletes from Acalanes. So we had 4 teams that I know of. Then we had teams that would travel. They'd come in from Fairfield. They would challenge us, call and say, look, we need a game, and Walnut Creek's fine because we're going to play in San Jose the next day. And so that was the thing. You know, people made the best of it. We didn't have to pay a lot of money for sports and all that. We just did our own thing. So anyway, I can remember, and this is another thing, when you went to the games at night, because there was nothing to do. There was no TV. There was radio. So the families would go down to the park and sit there in the stands, the bleachers, you know, and they would watch the game in Walnut Creek. And then you knew somebody. Here, your lawyer's playing shortstop, and the grocer's playing first base. And, you know, so you go, you know, it was nice. It was a real family thing. There was one player that I remember. His name was Elmer Tackett, and he played center field, I believe. And these teams that would travel in to play, us teams, well, you know, we had a little league there, you know, four team league there. But when the teams came in, they didn't know this fella. He had an arm like a cannon. And what happened was, well, I remember one night, a guy tagged up on third. There was a fly ball, and Elmer Tackett came in and caught the ball, and he fired at the home plate, and the ball got there about 10 feet before the guy got there. It was out by a mile, you know. And so he was a good player. All the kids watched him, and he was kind of like a local hero. He was a good player. And then, unfortunately, one night, my mother was there, and it was a bad night for her to be there because the VFW and the American Legion, wonderful veterans and all that, but they still had that war thing in their mind, so there was a kind of a riot that happened. Someone rounded third base, and they hit a good friend of mine. His name was Vince Graziano. We called him Grappo. He was an Accolani's athlete, a really neat guy. And they started hitting each other. But it wasn't like the fights now you see on the TV, on the baseball. I mean, these were serious. And this was blood, you know. So they really were hauling out at each other, hitting and banging each other around. And my mother was sitting in the stands. And so they quelled that down. And then the next day, my mother called the mayor. And she said, it was a bad scene. So the word got around. And so Grappo, one day I was talking to him, he says, first thing we did when we got to the field, we looked up in the stands to see if your mother's gray hair was up there. Gray-haired mother was up there. I shouldn't say that way. But anyway. But she didn't. Oh, no, but she did. I remember I listened to her phone call, and she says, I didn't approve of what happened last night. Oh, what happened? You know. So see, they never had any more trouble with that. But it was. But we had the sports were very much part of our lives, and I think it kept a lot of kids out of trouble because they were, even if they weren't good players, they were encouraged to participate, just to be there and be part of the, you know, the whole festivities, whatever you want to call them, the action, you know. So.
And then, what work did you work here in Walnut Creek? When you got older and started working, was your work here in Walnut Creek? You said something about being a recreation director?
Yeah, what I did is I majored in Parks and Recreation was my major at San Jose State. And then when I went through my field work, I worked in San Francisco. I worked in Oakland first, San Francisco, Daly City, and then a job opened in Walnut Creek. Unfortunately, they had a big layoff in the city about 6 months later, a year later, whatever it was. I ended up in, the last job I had in Parks and Recreation was down in Dublin, San Ramon. And at that time it was called the Valley Community Service District. And now it's called, they changed the name. But it was like a district rather than just a city or something like that. It was a district, and it included the fire department and a few other services and whatever. And the last job I held was recreation superintendent of the Valley Community Service District. And I left there in 76. And I got a broker's license. I was doing real estate. And that was interesting too, because especially in Walnut Creek, because I knew something about construction and houses and stuff like that. I did pretty well. I sold 4 houses in December one time, and the broker that I started out with before I became a broker myself, he said, "You won't sell anything. You won't sell anything in December." He says, that's not a real estate month. I sold 4 houses. And that was in 1979. And so in January I had checks coming in. But I'm still active, semi-active. I don't get into it that deep, but I get referrals and things like that, and so. Yeah.
How long did you work for the Walnut Creek Park and Rec?
It wasn't very long. It was about maybe a year, maybe something like that.
What was that like?
It wasn't bad. Let's see. What happened? Oh, I know what happened. I remember I always had good luck in athletics. Always had good luck. So they put me at Park Mead, and but that was as an assistant teacher during this summer session. And then later, when the summer session ended, for the rest of the summer, I would work as a playground leader or director, playground director, whatever you want to call it. So anyway, what happened was we had a bunch of kids, students, and classroom situation, and I was working with a teacher that everyone said, oh, she's the greatest teacher there is. I'm not going to mention her name. Oh, she's just a wonderful teacher and everything. Well, she lost it one day. And there were these kids that were screwing up, and they have to kind of get that out of their system a little bit. So I was kind of patient, but I guess she lost her patience, so she just grabbed these kids by the back of their jackets or shirts or whatever, and she just ran out of that room with these kids. And I thought, whoa, interesting. So then they ended the summer session, and they put me at Larkey, because that was my neighborhood. We always had the toughest kids in Walnut Creek at Larkey. This is the North Walnut Creek we're good athletes. So don't try anything with us, because we're going to beat you. We normally did. And so here I have these kids, and here I am in my 20s or whatever I was. And so I said, look, we're going to get this Olympics that we're going to go to in 2 weeks now. We got 2 weeks to prepare for them. And we did it. And we were the top. And I was working with kids that I'd never worked before. I didn't know half these kids. Some kids would run barefoot. They didn't even use shoes. But they did well. They were very well. We had a lot of success in sports in Walnut Creek, and it kind of harked back to that undefeated season that we had. The only undefeated team from Walnut Creek Elementary School. We were part of that when I was 14.
So what year was that?
That was 1949.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, 1949, and that's, I guess, when the good things started in Walnut Creek. That we were good athletes, and the problem with me is that when I graduated from Walnut Creek Grammar School, what happened was I never gained weight. I gained height. So here I was, 6'2", 6'3", and I weighed about 140, 135, and I couldn't play sports at Acalanes. So I got in with the coach and helped the coach and did the student, took care of things and statistics and whatever, and helped with the equipment and that sort of thing. But it was unfortunate, but up till until I was 14 or 15, I was very active in sports, and when we had a chance, we'd go to the games. My dad would have my uncle take us if he was working. We'd go to see the Oaks and or the Seals or whatever, and it was nice. And of course, Cal was here they were the big team now in the Bay Area, and they had a great teams there with Pappy Waldorf coach. I remember 3 years in a row. They won they didn't win the Rose Bowl, but they did go. They did go. And
did your dad know Emil Villa?
Yeah, he knew him, and I think, if I'm not mistaken now, this has been a long time ago, but when I went to Italy the first time with my dad, 1952, it was kind of a tough time after the war. Italy went through a lot of, struggles there. And Emil Villa had his family in Italy was in the same town, or part of his family was in the same town with part of my family. And I could recognize them because I could see the American clothes they were wearing, I could kind of identify with them. And I could be off, but I'm pretty sure, it's a long time ago, this was 1952 now, and so we're going back 65, 70 years, but I remember being over there. Things were so inexpensive that you could have a nice lunch, dinner. My father one time said he was afraid that I couldn't go to a restaurant on my own. It was no problem, so he had gone to the next town for some business. It came through, and he came down the street, and I'm sitting in the window of the restaurant having my lunch, and he looked, he waved, went on.
Proud moment.
But you know, you could eat a nice lunch for like $1 American money, $1.50, and he would always tip at least $1 American. He'd tip American money. They liked him. He really got the good service wherever he went. You know, we had a good time there. So,
what are some of the stories that you have in your notes that you wanted to share about the town?
oh,
Is there anything in there that we haven't talked about that you wanted to share with us?
oh, there's a lot of different things. I don't know. The town was. There was some fella I should mention because I think he was one of the most. I don't know. There's a word for it. He worked for he was a salesman. He was from Texas. Came to Walnut Creek, but by way of San Francisco. He was in San Francisco. He was a car salesman for Ford Motor Company, but he was unique. His name was Rhett Turner. And he didn't go in and grab wanted to get the car sold. He sold trucks. And he was smart. He sold a pickup truck. And all he had to do is, here it was. You see a pickup truck on the street, parked in the street or whatever, you write down the phone number, address, and then you pursue that. That's your lead. And he was selling all these trucks, these Ford 150 pickup trucks. So now they have a big convention in San Francisco, Ford Motor Company. All the dealers from all over the United States. They had like 2,000, 3,000 dealers, whatever it was. And Lee Iacocca at that time was the head of the Ford Motor Company. And he said, I want to meet this, I won't say the little expletive they use. According to our records, everybody in Walnut Creek drives a Ford pickup truck. So what happens is he meets him. He meets Rhett Turner. And Rhett Turner told him, he says, well, this is my technique. He said, wait a minute. We're going to schedule you for tomorrow before the gang leaves. We're going to schedule you. And we're going to put you up there, and you're going to tell them how to sell trucks. Not just cars, trucks, pickup trucks. Okay, fine. And he did. And then he saved enough money to get his own agency in Walnut Creek. He wanted to buy Sammy Evans Ford. We had an agency called Sammy Evans Ford. Same place where the Ford place is now. But he needed some more money, so he took in a partner. And the partner was Cecil Whitebone. Cecil Whitebone was one of the first guys that used to use TV advertising in the old black and white. And so, well, what are you going to name it? You got Cecil Whitebone and you got Rhett Turner. So what are you going to name, you know, the Ford agency? And so, well, we'll call it Rhett White Ford. A little, one name and the other name, and sounds good, and that's what it was for many years. I bought a car from him, and he was a personal friend of mine. I bought a car from him for $3,400. It had a Lincoln Continental style engine from the previous year when Lincoln used that engine. It lasted me for 299,000 miles. Best car I ever had. 17 years. It cost me a total of $200 a year for that car. And we used to have bagna calda dinners, lunches. It's an Italian from the Piedmont part of Italy. Delicious, but it involves a whole cup of chopped garlic. And you put cream and butter, and then you put vegetables in there. It's like a fondue, but the vegetables are cooked, and then you eat them with, fresh French bread, and then you have the wine and all that. So we used to do that about once every 2 or 3 months. And Rhett and Steve Prado on 3rd Avenue, with the help of his daughter, we'd all get together and have a nice bagna calda feed and everything. And he was so nice. He was just and then for all his work he did for the phone, I remember for the Ford company, him and his wife, who was his secretary at work, were given Rolex watches.
You're going to tell me about the carnivals.
Okay, the carnivals, well, we don't have them anymore. And for good reason. Because the carnivals that we had in Walnut Creek years ago, in the summertime, they'd come through, they'd either rent a place, you know, a vacant lot somewhere. One was near the old co-op. One was one time downtown near Broadway, right on one of the streets in South Main. That ran into South Main. And these people would come in and they would take money out of the community. You know, they were kind of crooked. I was watching. I was young, but I could see that the fellow would, they'd have something where you pound nails, and here's a contractor friend of ours, and he's real good, you know. So he hit the first nail would go in, the second nail, the third nail would twist. Well, he would take the first two out of one pocket, and then the other nail, the third nail, he would take out of the third with a weak nail, you know. So anyway, so that was going on, and a few other things, and then there were some women involved, which I won't get into details, but they would walk along Geary Road, and they'd turn a flashlight, leave it under their chin so they could see what they look like at night, and so and we were in high school then, the high school kids, we knew what was going on.
So are streetwalkers on Geary Road?
Yeah, just for a couple of days.
What? Oh my! When the carnival came to town?
Yeah, that was a carnival, part of the carnival one time. Yeah, yeah, and so anyway, so all these things kind of built up, and so now one time this carnival came in, and that neighbor was angry because the one that was hammering the nails and they wouldn't go in, you know. So what happened? They called the police, and of course we had Johnny Jordan was the police chief, and he always, of course, used the sheriff deputies also that came in and helped, you know. So here they were at the carnival, and they said they were listening and all that, and that was it. No more carnivals. And that you have to have a special permit, but the Walnut Festival was okay. That's a good carnival. And they watched that very carefully and all that, you know. But as far as these other ones that are fly-by-nights, I call them, look out, because no chance in Walnut Creek. They don't allow that.
What did the KLX radio announcer proclaim? You told me once that somebody from KLX radio made a statement about the future of sports and Walnut.
Oh, yeah. We would listen, because we didn't have TV, when we were listening to the sportscasters on the radio. And there was one fellow on, I think it was radio station KLX, and he said to everybody, he says, everybody listen, California will never have any major league teams of any kind. And the reason for that is we are just too far away from where all the action is. And I was a young boy, here I am, 9 years old, 10 years old, listening to this guy, you know, very negative. Well, what he didn't realize is there's a new invention called the airplane, you know. And so he wasn't aware of that, I guess. But anyway, so we do have more major league sports than anybody. I don't know, I mean, you can't, you know, see them all because you don't have the time. But anyway, so that's what happened.
What would you say your sentiments towards Walnut Creek are?
Sentiments?
Yeah.
Oh, I still love the town. I love the town. You know, it's completely changed, but it's still Walnut Creek. You know, and it'll always be Walnut Creek.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say that you loved about it the most, having grown up here and lived?
Well, I'm a people person. I love people, and I know the people that came here and lived here and had their businesses here, or raised their families here, went to school here, whatever. They were wonderful people. We're very fortunate in Walnut Creek. Even now, we have a lot of traffic, a lot of different things that are going on that maybe bother people, but it's still a wonderful community. You know, my heart is here. You know, I made the rounds and I came back. You know, of course I always lived here. You know, I always had connections and all that, but there were a couple, 3 years, like when I went to school at San Jose State University, and you know,
So I want to finish with one final story. We just have a few minutes left, and I know you told, so it's kind of a nice community story you told about you went to Joanne's dress shop.
Oh, yeah.
So tell us that story.
Oh, I just told you that the other day. It just came to my mind. What happened was I used to buy, my mother, well, I was kind of the, my brother was easier to raise, let's put it that way, than I was. I was kind of like into a lot of different things and active, and, you know, they always knew I was around because I was always doing something or being loud or whatever. So anyway, but what she did like about me was that I would, when we would go to the doctor, I'd take her to the doctor and take her home, we would stop and have dinner or lunch. And she liked that because my brother didn't like to do that. So anyway, and also when it came to buying gifts for Mother's Day or Christmas or whatever, I would buy her something. I wouldn't mind going into a woman's store and buying something for her, you know, a dress or a robe or something. And so what I would do is I would go ahead and here was Mother's Day coming in or whatever. And so I went into, I think it was Joanne's, or either that or it was, no, it was Joanne's, I think. It was Joanne's, a woman's store called Joanne's, women's apparel. And it was a nice dress. And of course, at one time I bought her one at I Magnin when we had Magnins here or whatever it was. And so we go in, I went in, and I think I went in with my dad. I think I brought him with me that day. Well, by the time we got home, everyone in Walnut Creek knew that we went and bought a woman's dress at Joanne's, at Joanne's store. A nice dress. My mother was very happy when she got it. But anyway, it was just a little thing that, you know, that's the little town talking there, you see. They know everything, what's going on, you know, so that was just one of the many things.